The air inside the VIP Sky Lounge on the 81st floor was thick with the scent of expensive champagne and historical betrayal. Tonight was the grand launch of Vance Tech's global financial platform, a night where my husband of 3 years, Julian, was supposed to celebrate his ultimate career peak. Instead, it became the stage for my public execution. I was standing near the glass windows, wearing a simple, gray, oversized sweater and flats, my glasses slightly sliding down my nose. In a room full of silk dresses and diamond tuxedos, I looked like an invisible, lower-class ghost. With a brutal, metallic clink, Julian's platinum wedding ring was unceremoniously slammed onto the silver tray right in front of me, bouncing off the crystal glasses before rolling into a puddle of spilled wine. "Take that worthless metal and get out of my sight, Elena," Julian hissed, his voice cutting through the soft classical music like a serrated blade. He stood there, adjusted his brand-new tailored Italian suit, looking down at me with an expression of pure, newly rich disgust. "Look at yourself. You are a pathetic, boring computer clerk who sits in a dark corner typing data all day. Your very presence in this room is lowering my corporate valuation. Tomorrow morning, my firm is going public on the New York Stock Exchange. I am marrying Victoria Pendelton, the daughter of the billionaire chairman behind me. A faceless, unglamorous girl like you doesn't belong in the elite tier of tech royalty." My heart didn't shatter. It froze into a solid block of absolute sub-zero digital ice. I slowly lifted my eyes, looking past him to the VIP leather booth where Victoria Pendelton sat, holding a glass of scotch and laughing mockingly while pointing at my old sweater. "Julian," I said, my voice dropping into a terrifyingly quiet, mechanical calm that caused his smug smirk to slightly falter. "You didn't build this platform alone. For 3 long years, I stayed awake until 4 a.m. every single night, fixing your broken server scripts while you were out networking with investors. I built the security firewall that keeps your entire corporate infrastructure breathing. You typed code, Elena. That's what low-level laborers do." Julian laughed loudly, a sound filled with artificial arrogance as he stepped closer, his breath hot against my face. "Anyone can replace a boring coder, but my brilliant algorithms are what secured the $50 million Pendelton contract tonight. You are dead weight, Elena. The divorce papers are already filed. Take your little laptop and vanish from my city." A dangerous, slow, and utterly glacial smile spread across my lips. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I calmly reached down, picked up his discarded wedding ring from the wet tray, and dropped it directly into my sweater pocket. "You are entirely right, Julian. Anyone can replace a coder," I whispered, my emerald green eyes flashing with a lethal, untouchable authority that caused the warm air in the Sky Lounge to instantly drop in temperature. "But nobody can replace the master architecture. Enjoy your launch party, because your corporate empire has exactly 60 minutes left to breathe." Before he could even process my words, I turned on my heel and walked out of the heavy glass doors into the midnight rain. They thought they had just discarded a penniless, faceless nerd. What their fragile tech bro minds could never comprehend is that Vance Tech didn't own a single line of the underlying security core. The multi-billion-dollar framework they were about to launch was built entirely on a highly classified, sovereign encryption algorithm, and the sole biological patent holder of that algorithm, It wasn't Julian Vance. It was the Sterling Defense Group, the largest private cybersecurity monopoly in the Western Hemisphere. And I was Elena Sterling, the absolute ruler of that empire. I pulled out my encrypted satellite smartphone, my fingers flying across the custom interface as I bypassed the public grid, dialing a maximum priority military-grade hotline. "Marcus," I commanded coldly, as the call connected in less than a single second. "The human trial is officially terminated. Julian Vance has just breached the core morality clause. Revoke the global enterprise license for Vance Tech immediately. Activate the financial kill switch. I want their entire operational server mainframe completely bricked before the clock strikes midnight." To understand how the most powerful cryptographic mind in the defense sector ended up living as a quiet, invisible clerk for a toxic tech entrepreneur, you have to understand the final doctrine of my father, Arthur Sterling. He was a man whose code protected the central banking mainframes of London, Wall Street, and Zurich. Yet he despised nothing more than flashy, unearned arrogance. "Elena," he had told me before passing the master encryption keys of our family trust to my hand, "the tech world is filled with parasites who wear expensive suits and talk about innovation, while the real geniuses labor in silence. Never trust a man who brags about the castle before he even knows how to lay a brick. Live among them as a simple worker. Watch how they treat you when they think you have no power. That is how you find their true security flaw." For 3 long years, I honored his doctrine. I buried my identity behind a multi-layered, state-sponsored cryptographic firewall, living as Elena Ross, a quiet, submissive wife who spent her days managing the low-level data inputs for Julian's startup. When I met Julian, he was a broke, desperate developer, drowning in debt, crying in his tiny rented apartment because his servers were constantly crashing under malicious DDoS attacks. I saw a spark of genuine ambition in him, so I became his silent, invisible guardian angel. I used my hidden master clearance to quietly inject elite Sterling-grade defense protocols into his messy code, routing massive, multi-million-dollar enterprise clients directly to his platform. I literally handed him a bulletproof tech monopoly on a silver platter, allowing him to take 100% of the public credit. The moment the venture capital money hit his account, the humble developer completely vanished. He filled his garage with leased hypercars, bought a penthouse he couldn't afford, and began treating me like a shameful, lower-class secretary who was lucky to even wash his laundry. For the past 6 months, he and his new elitist business partners had openly humiliated me, calling me a dull, ambitionless data entry machine who was holding back his ascent into high society. Tonight, I gave him his final compliance test, and he failed with catastrophic finality. I stood on the wet sidewalk outside the skyscraper, the freezing rain drenching my gray sweater as I held the secure phone to my ear. On the other end, the deep, thunderous hum of the Sterling mainframe servers echoed through the receiver as Marcus executed my executive wipe commands. "Executing the master license revocation now, Commander Sterling," Marcus reported, his voice vibrating with a cold, lethal level of technical authority. "The cryptographic master deed for Vance Tech's platform is registered under your private sovereign signature. We have just pulled the remote digital certificates. As of exactly 3 minutes ago, Vance Tech no longer has the legal or technical right to run a single server on the global grid. What about their impending IPO launch at midnight, Marcus? I asked, my emerald eyes narrowing as a chilling, unyielding calm settled over my heart. Without our core encryption layer, their entire database is a naked, unverified legal liability, Marcus chuckled dryly, his tone filled with professional executioner contempt. The New York Stock Exchange automated compliance bots will detect the security breach in exactly 15 minutes. Their trading ticket will be permanently blacklisted. They are facing an immediate material collapse. Excellent, I whispered, stepping into the back of a black, armored luxury sedan that pulled up to the curb, its tinted windows masking my presence as the security team bowed deeply to me. Drive us back to the corporate headquarters. Let us watch the countdown from the Sky Tower. The husband wanted a public launch. Let us give him a public liquidation. Back inside the glittering, crystal-lit VIP Sky Lounge, Julian Vance was standing on the main stage, a wireless microphone in his hand, his chest puffed out with absolute, newly rich arrogance. Behind him, a massive 60-foot high-definition LED screen displayed the glowing green countdown clock for Vance Tech's global financial platform launch. There were exactly 45 minutes left until midnight. 45 minutes until the platform went live worldwide and his firm officially debuted on the New York Stock Exchange. Tonight, we don't just launch a company, Julian shouted into the microphone, his voice dripping with artificial confidence as the crowd of tech investors and Wall Street executives erupted into thunderous applause. He turned, flashing a smug smile at Victoria Pendelton and her billionaire father, Arthur, who were sitting in the front row. We launch a legacy. Vance Tech has built a bulletproof, unbreachable security core that will control the digital transaction pipelines of every major bank in this hemisphere. Others tried to tell me that a startup couldn't command this level of power, but my personal vision proved them wrong. Right at that exact peak second of his supreme ego, a sharp, deafening, and horrific electronic screech tore through the audio systems, causing the high society guests to instantly cover their ears in agony. The massive LED screen behind Julian didn't just flicker. It violently turned a blood-red crimson before losing power completely, plunging the entire main stage into a dark, hollow shadow. Within less than 3 seconds, the hundreds of iPad terminals held by the investment agents across the room began buzzing frantically, their screens flashing a cold, mechanical error message in bold white letters. Error 403, Master Embedded License revoked. Security Core unverified. Julian's smug smile instantly froze, his face turning an ash-gray color under the dim house lights. He turned around, desperately slapping the side of the main technical monitor. What is the meaning of this? Technical crew? Reboot the primary servers right now. It's just a minor local script glitch. Get the countdown back on the screen. But the head DevOps engineer didn't move. He was staring at his master diagnostic laptop, his fingers flying across the keys in a state of absolute visceral panic, sweat pouring down his forehead. Julian, we can't reboot, the engineer screamed, his voice cracking with pure terror as he held the screen up. The entire underlying encryption layer, it's completely gone. It didn't just crash, Julian. The digital certificates holding our cryptographic signature have been remotely wiped from the global ledger. The master code has locked us out. Our database is currently a naked, unverified security liability, The platform is completely bricked. The luxury Sky Lounge dissolved into a scene of chaotic, high-stakes corporate warfare. The Wall Street hedge fund managers, who had been sipping champagne seconds ago, were now screaming into their phones, desperately canceling their buy orders before the midnight deadline. Arthur Pendelton, the billionaire chairman of the Pendelton Group, stood up from his leather booth, his face contorted in an expression of pure, tyrannical fury. He marched onto the stage, his heavy leather shoes stomping over the wires, and grabbed Julian violently by his silk lapels. "What the hell is going on, Julian?" Arthur roared, his deep voice vibrating with absolute rage. "My private secretary just received an emergency red alert from the New York Stock Exchange compliance bots. They detected that your platform's security framework is completely empty. They have officially suspended our IPO ticket. If this system isn't live and verified by exactly 12 a.m., the Pendelton Group loses $50 million in cash, and your firm is permanently blacklisted for corporate fraud." Julian felt his knees literally give out, stumbling backward against the dark LED screen. No, that's impossible. I am the Chief Technology Officer. I approve the code myself. Nobody has the clearance to pull the security core except... His voice suddenly choked in his throat. The memory of the wet sidewalk, the midnight rain, and the icy green eyes of the woman he had just thrown out flashed into his mind like a lightning bolt. Anyone can replace a coder, Julian, but nobody can replace the master architecture. Your corporate empire has exactly 60 minutes left to breathe. "Elena," Julian whispered, a wave of primitive, terrifying realization crashing over his heart. He reached into his pocket, his hand shaking so violently he nearly dropped his custom smartphone and frantically dialed my private number. The phone rang exactly twice before the connection clicked open. But it wasn't the soft, timid voice of the submissive wife he had treated like an invisible maid for 3 long years. It was a voice of absolute, untouchable, and imperial dominance. "You have exactly 29 minutes left before the midnight liquidation, Julian," I said, my voice cutting through the speakerphone with a glacial, mechanical precision that silenced the entire stage. "Elena, what did you do to my servers?" Julian shrieked, his voice cracking into a pathetic, high-pitched sob as he fell to his knees on the stage floor, gripping the phone with both hands. "Put the code back. The New York Stock Exchange just suspended our IPO. My billionaire investors are leaving. You are destroying my life over a stupid wedding ring?" "I didn't destroy your life, Julian. I simply stopped supporting it," I laughed softly. A dangerous, freezing sound that caused every tech executive in the room to break into a cold sweat. "You told me earlier tonight that a low-level computer clerk didn't belong in your elite tier of tech royalty. You told me anyone could replace a coder. So go ahead, Julian. Replace me. Fix the security core yourself before the clock strikes 12. "Elena, I beg you. I was blind. I was stupid," Julian cried out into the dirt, tears finally streaming down his pale face as he looked at the empty wedding ring tray on the table. "I'll take the divorce papers back. We can share the $50 million contract. Just sign the digital certificate and save the platform." "The certificate isn't mine to sign anymore, Julian," I whispered coldly. "The underlying encryption algorithm belongs exclusively to the Sterling Defense Group. the monopoly that controls the central banking servers of this country. And as the sole biological chairman of that empire, I have officially blacklisted Vance Tech forever. Goodbye, Julian. The phone line went completely dead. The ticking clock was down to its final minutes, and the parasite had officially run out of time. The massive golden digital clock on the structural pillar of the Sky Lounge ticked down to the final fatal seconds. 11:59 p.m. The silence inside the room was so heavy you could hear the frantic, erratic breathing of the 100 tech investors who were trapped in a state of financial paralysis. Julian Vance stood paralyzed on the center stage, his eyes wide, bloodshot, and hollow as he stared at the pitch-black LED screen. He looked like a man standing on a scaffold, waiting for the trapdoor to drop. Then, the clock struck 12. Midnight. Instead of a global celebration, a sharp, flashing crimson light erupted from every single executive tablet in the lounge. The New York Stock Exchange compliance mainframe didn't just reject Vance Tech's listing. It issued an absolute, public, and historic federal fraud warning. Arthur Pendleton's personal satellite phone buzzed violently in his hand. He looked down at the screen, and his face instantly turned from a deep crimson rage into a pale, ghostly shade of gray. The message was directly from the Securities and Exchange Commission Oversight Committee. "Julian," Arthur gasped, his voice cracking with a terrifying level of panic as he stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the monitor cables. "The SEC, they didn't just suspend the IPO. They have officially frozen every single corporate banking directory under the name of Vance Tech. They have launched an immediate, high-priority investigation into criminal market misrepresentation and algorithmic forgery. My $50 million, my entire corporate escrow investment, is completely vaporized." No, that's a mistake," Julian shrieked, his mind snapping as he sprinted toward the technical booth, violently shoving his chief engineer out of the chair. He began hitting the keyboard with his bare fists, screaming at the monitor as if the glass could hear him. "Reboot the code. Force the digital signature. I am Julian Vance. I am the tech king of this city. You cannot lock me out of my own system." But the screen didn't respond to his panic. A cold, static white text slowly generated across the center of the dark mainframe. "Access permanently denied. Security protocol 99 active. Property of Sterling Defense Group." The heavy glass double doors of the VIP Sky Lounge were suddenly thrown open. 6 towering black-suited corporate security tactical officers from the Sterling Defense Group marched into the room, their heavy footsteps echoing with the crushing weight of absolute authority. Directly behind them walked Marcus, his cold eyes locked onto Julian with a look of supreme, clinical contempt. In his hands, he held a leather-bound judicial seizure folder bearing the golden crest of the International Copyright Tribunal. "Arthur Pendleton," Marcus announced, his voice slicing through the chaotic room like a diamond blade, instantly silencing the screaming investors. "The Sterling Defense Group has just finalized the global asset quarantine. As of exactly 2 minutes past midnight, Vance Tech is officially a bankrupt, blacklisted legal shell." Victoria Pendleton sprinted toward Marcus, her diamond bracelets rattling violently as she pointed a manicured finger at his face. "Who the hell do you think you are? My father owns the infrastructure of this venture circle. You cannot bring armed private security into our launch party. We are tech royalty." "Your royalty is built on stolen property, Miss Pendleton," Marcus replied coldly, turning his tablet to face the billionaire chairman. "Arthur, look closely at the underlying master patent of the platform your daughter's fiancé claimed to invent. Julian Vance didn't write the security architecture. He merely copied a highly classified commercial encryption layer held exclusively under the sovereign personal trust of Elena Sterling." Arthur Pendleton lunged forward, grabbing Julian by his hair, forcing his head down onto the cold technical desk. "You pathetic, lying worm! You told me you were a tech god. You told me your wife was just a stupid, low-level data clerk who didn't understand your vision." She was a clerk," Julian sobbed, his face pressed against the desk, his tears smudging the digital layout paper. "She lived in a studio apartment. She wore old sweaters. Marcus, please, tell Elena to put the license back. I'll give her 80% of the company. I'll crawl on my knees to her." "You don't have a single share left to give, Julian," Marcus laughed dryly, a chilling sound that caused the hairs on Julian's neck to stand up. Chairman Elena Sterling didn't just pull the license. 10 minutes ago, she bought out the entire underlying debt leverage of your startup's lease. You don't own this server network. You don't own your corporate name. And you certainly don't own the ground beneath your feet. Within less than 15 minutes, the entire high society launch party was completely demolished. The tech investors fled the building like rats deserting a sinking vessel, desperate to distance their names from Julian's radioactive corporate ruin. Arthur Pendleton turned to his private security detail, his face twisted in pure, unadulterated disgust as he looked at Julian groveling on the floor. "Throw this garbage out of my sight. Victoria, strip off that engagement ring. We are leaving this parasite to rot in the mud." Victoria Pendleton didn't hesitate. She ripped the massive 4-carat diamond ring off her finger and slammed it violently into Julian's bleeding face before turning on her heel and marching out to the elevators with her father. The Sky Lounge security guards grabbed Julian by his silk collar, dragging him down the long, marbled corridor. His custom Italian shoes were scraped along the floor, his brand-new tailored suit jacket tearing open as he was hauled like a sack of garbage through the service exit and thrown directly out onto the freezing, mud-soaked sidewalk of the public street. The heavy glass doors of the skyscraper slammed shut behind him with a deafening final click, locking him out of the luxury tech world forever. Julian collapsed onto his knees in the pouring, freezing midnight rain, the black water soaking through his clothes within seconds. His slicked back hair fell across his face in messy, pathetic strands as he looked down at his shaking, empty hands. Everything he had traded his marriage for, the $50 million contract, the billionaire wife, the high society status, had completely vanished into thin air, leaving him with nothing but a pending federal prison sentence for corporate forgery. Right on cue, a long, black, armored luxury sedan pulled up smoothly to the curb, its pristine chrome wheels reflecting the flashing red lights of the city. The door opened slowly, and I stepped out onto the wet asphalt, holding a large black silk umbrella that kept the rain completely away from my royal black silk executive suit. Julian looked up, his eyes wide with an absolute breathless state of raw despair. He crawled through the puddles of dirty water, reaching his trembling hands toward my polished leather boots, crying into the rain. "Elena, please, look at me. I was blind. I was arrogant. I thought the money made me a genius. I still love you, Elena. We can go back to our apartment. I'll destroy the divorce papers, please. Just give me the encryption key." I looked down at his shivering, broken figure with an icy, unyielding smile that cut deeper than any blade. "You told me earlier tonight that a pathetically simple coder didn't belong in your elite tier of tech royalty, Julian," I said, my voice carrying the absolute crushing power of a global cybersecurity empress. "You threw your wedding ring into the dirt because you thought your flashy suits made you a god. Now you are kneeling in the mud begging a computer clerk for your life." I stepped back into the warmth of the armored vehicle, closing the door as the engine purred to life, leaving his desperate screams to be drowned out by the thunder. "Enjoy the countdown, Julian, because tomorrow morning the federal marshals are coming to lock you away for the next 14 years. The heavy, soundproofed doors of the federal courtroom in the Southern District of New York closed with a definitive, chilling thud. The absolute illusion of Julian Vance's tech dynasty had been entirely ground into fine digital dust, leaving behind nothing but the raw, bleeding wreckage of his criminal arrogance. Julian stood behind the defense table, his knees knocking together so violently he had to hold on to the wood to remain standing. The custom Italian suits and the luxury gold watch were completely gone. He was dressed in a coarse, brilliant orange inmate jumpsuit, heavy steel shackles tightly binding his wrists and ankles together, his face hollowed out by months of absolute terror. "Julian Vance," the federal judge announced, her voice echoing through the massive room with the cold, unyielding authority of the Constitution. "This court has completed its review of the forensic data network logs submitted by the Sterling Defense Group. You did not merely experience a platform glitch. You deliberately engaged in multi-million-dollar corporate forgery, systemic intellectual property theft, and wire fraud to inflate your company's valuation before an international public launch. The digital sector is built on code, and the law will not tolerate parasites who steal the genius of others to crown themselves kings." The judge slammed her heavy wooden gavel down with a thunderous crash that shattered the remaining pieces of Julian's soul. "I hereby sentence you to 15 years in a maximum security federal penitentiary with zero eligibility for early release," the judge decreed, without a single ounce of mercy. Furthermore, under federal asset forfeiture warrants, every single asset under your name, including your frozen venture capital accounts, your luxury penthouse, and your leased hypercars, is permanently liquidated to satisfy the massive civil damages owed to the Sterling monopoly. This court is adjourned." Julian went completely hysterical. He let out a loud, high-pitched, pathetic shriek as two massive federal marshals grabbed his chained arms. The heavy iron links around his ankles rattled horribly against the hardwood floor as they began dragging him toward the dark holding cells. "Elena, no, please, tell them it was our company," Julian screamed, his voice cracking into a desperate, terrified sob as he looked back at the gallery. "I was doing it for our future. I didn't mean to throw the ring away. Elena!" I stood, dead center in the front row of the gallery, wearing a magnificent, custom-tailored, dark navy blue executive silk dress. My hands were calmly draped over my lap, and my emerald green eyes watched his extraction with an icy, absolute calm. He had treated my silence as weakness, and now the system he tried to exploit had permanently deleted his existence. The very next morning, the grand executive boardroom at the absolute summit of the Sterling Defense Group was alive with an immediate, merciless purge. I walked into the obsidian-lined room, my dark navy dress flowing behind me with an untouchable, imperial power. The 40 senior network directors stood at absolute attention, sweat pouring down their faces as they waited for my command. They knew that with a single biometric swipe of my thumb, I could revoke their security clearances and blacklist them from the tech sector forever. I took my place at the head of the long table, my gaze scanning their terrified faces. "Marcus," I commanded, my voice slicing through the silence like a scalpel. "Yes, Commander Sterling," Marcus replied instantly, bowing his head with absolute reverence. "The Vance Tech infrastructure is officially under our total sovereign control," I announced coldly. "I want the underlying financial platform completely overhauled. We are stripping away the elitist corporate paywalls. Effective at noon, the platform is rebranded as the Charles Core, a completely free, open-source advanced cybersecurity matrix dedicated to protecting independent programmers, low-level data clerks, and small working-class businesses from predatory tech conglomerates. The people who do the real, honest labor in this country will finally have the ultimate shield." The directors bowed in unison, scurrying out of the room to execute my directive. The digital throne was finally back in the hands of its rightful architect. 1 full year has passed since that freezing night in the VIP Sky Lounge, when Julian Vance slammed his wedding ring onto a silver tray and called me a dead weight. The Sterling Defense Group has achieved absolute dominance over the global cryptographic network. By shifting our power to protect the ground-level workers and honest innovators, our system firewall has become completely unbreachable, commanding 60% of the central banking data pipelines worldwide. I stood in my magnificent glass-walled office on Park Avenue, holding a warm porcelain cup of black coffee. The beautiful afternoon sun was setting over the Manhattan skyline, casting a warm golden glow across my dark mahogany desk. Sitting right in the center of the wood was a beautifully polished silver frame holding a photograph of my late father, Arthur Sterling. Marcus walked into the suite quietly, stepping to my side and placing a secure, encrypted tablet onto the desk. "The annual inmate operational logs have just updated, Chairman," Marcus said with a respectful, proud smile. I opened the file, reviewing the final status on our legal ledger. Julian Vance had just completed his first year at the maximum security federal facility. The brilliant chief technology officer who once bragged about his elite algorithms was now spending 16 hours a day inside the prison's low-end electronic recycling center. He sits in a dark, concrete corner, wearing heavy rubber gloves, performing the grueling, mind-numbing manual task of stripping rusted copper wires and performing basic, low-level data entry on ancient monochrome computer terminals. He works frantically under the watchful eyes of armed guards for exactly 12 cents an hour, performing the exact same repetitive, invisible machine labor he once looked down upon when he threw me into the mud. I closed the file, looking out at the vast, breathtaking horizon of the city. I felt a profound, beautiful state of absolute peace in my soul. Julian truly believed that because I chose to live humbly, work quietly in the background, and honor my father's memory with silence, I was an easy target to be crushed, humiliated, and discarded for a flashy contract. He forgot the ultimate law of the digital age. Never stomp on the person who built the operating system you are trying to run. Never mistake humility for weakness, because the quiet clerk typing data next to you today might just hold the master kill switch to your entire empire tomorrow. Thank you so much for listening to the story on Cold Calm Stories 1. If you believe that true genius always outlasts arrogant parasites, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more deep dive dramatic tales. See you in the next story.